Thank you so much for staying with us. And of course, it's about time for us now to delve into our discussion segment for today. And of course, the conversation will be incomplete if we fail to mention that we are in the 16th day of activism. Activism of what, you might ask? Is about accelerating actions to end gender-based violence and, of course, femicide. And we'll be having a guest shortly that will be joining us to, shed more light on this. As Nigeria marks the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, activists are urging the adoption of proactive measures to combat various forms of dehumanizing acts targeting girls. Gender-based violence has become a pervasive social issue in Nigeria, Africa, and globally, emphasizing the necessity for reforms in the existing framework to eradicate such harmful practices. And of course, joining us right about now to, delve into this conversation and of course, give us various forms and shapes as regards what gender-based violence is all about. I have with me Chizoba Akune. She is the Executive Director, Center for Individual and Child Development. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good. Today we'll be talking about gender-based violence, and of course we would understand that in recent times such acts have taken various forms and shapes, especially with result to the increase in insurgency, especially in the Northeast, where we've got to see a girl child who have been forced into early marriage, and that have also led to physical, mental, and social assault on the girl child. But of course, for the sake of this conversation, our audience will want to know what exactly is gender-based violence and of course, femicide.
Okay, so gender-based violence basically is any act that people do that impedes the growth of the girl child.
When you say people, is it a gender or general?
Well, general, because most times the conversations usually lead to what men do, right? But we'll find out that other females, other people who are authority figures like mothers, like certain females in the society, whatever they do that has to impede on her development. And when I mean her development, I mean her psychosocial development, her emotional development, her career development, right? And so when people talk about gender-based violence, all they think about is the physical abuse, right? The physical abuse is what is seen. Because you get to see the marks on her body, you get to see her bleeding and all. But you know that also emotionally there's another form of violence.
Sure.
Not allowing her to go to school to achieve her optimum best is also another form of violence. So these things happen in different ways, in different contexts, in different cultural setting. And just right now you said something about the North, where also you have this issue of the girl child not being allowed to go to school because she has to get married on time. But it will be nice for us to know that all the states in Nigeria has adopted the Child Rights Act, except I think Bauchi, that is yet to adopt it. So looking forward, we hope that they would, number one, eradicate early marriage totally, and number two, allow the girl child to have an equal opportunity to go to school.
All right. So when you talked about an impedance, especially when it comes to the girl child growth, you looked at it from the angle of, okay, from the part of the parent, the mother. Would the mother want to deliberately impede on the growth of a child, especially when it comes to accessing quality education, striving as the boy child, especially when it comes to level of achievement socially, economically, and of course educationally? Will a woman want to do that to a child?
I always say that, you see, when you look at the family structure, there's something called the family system, right?
Okay.
And a lot of people don't understand it, right? So the family system is the father, the mother. That's the first tier. The second tier is the siblings.
Okay.
So when you have the siblings, then you have the arrow that moves from the parents to the siblings, right? And then you have the arrow across. Now, when people don't understand these things, what happens most time is that they were product of broken family relationships. They were also victims of harm, victims of violence. So what happens is there is a circle, and they keep doing it. So take, for instance, a mother that wasn't allowed to go to school, right? Maybe she was married off early because they thought that that's the best for her. Or a mother that had to be circumcised. Now, there's every likelihood that she would do those same things to her children. Not because she feels that it's good or it's bad or whatever. But people always act within the framework of what they understand.
So could that be assumed to be subconscious?
Yes, sometimes it could be subconscious.
So they're not doing it deliberately?
Sometimes it could be subconscious, sometimes it could be deliberate.
In a case where a child grows up and never had access to education and decides to feel that that's the best way to train up his or her own child and decides to do that, it's not deliberate, right?
Well, okay.
Could that be attributed to culture?
Yeah, it could be attributed to culture and personal differences.
So that's not impeding on the child's growth?
That's impeding on the child's growth, definitely. It is.
Okay, so
it is.
So now let's talk about femicide. What exactly is femicide? That looks like a very big vocabulary. So what's femicide?
Okay, so femicide virtually has to do with anything that has to do with the feminine gender, number one.
In the protective sense or against it?
Against it.
Okay.
Against it.
Cite an example.
Okay, so I just mentioned, okay, so since we're within the purview of gender-based violence, let me talk about bullying.
Okay.
You know, bullying is or gaslighting.
Okay.
This is one of the ways that people are emotionally abused, but we do not talk about it, or we push it under the carpet, because there is this expectation of, as a female, you have to keep getting, collecting, and you know, you just have to be calm and retain and never complain, right? And what happens is that most times these things lead to mental health issues among females. But when the society feels that it is right, what happens is that they are emotionally destroying the capacity of these females and making them not to be act in their optimal levels.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we are advocating right now is that every girl child knows her right, and apart from the fact that she knows her right, we're also talking to families, we're talking to males, we're talking to stakeholders, trying to tell them that, see, why don't you help the girl child uphold her rights, uphold her voice, and allow her voice to be heard and recognized and received. You understand? Let her say things that, you know, borders on her, things that are impeding on her growth and her development, and let everyone listen to her. Because these things we're talking about, if you notice, we've been talking about these issues over and over again, and it's more like pouring water on the dog's back. Because we're talking and people are acting as if they are listening, or rather they will listen,
but no action is taken.
There is no reinforcement, there is no action, there is no deliberate step that we're seeing in having these changes implemented.
Okay.
And so that's why we're saying protect her, and it's in all ramifications.
Okay. So talking about the 16 days of activism, you know, a campaign that you guys are, you know, championing, especially when it comes to accelerating actions to end gender-based violence and femicide. How are you going about this? That's number one. And of course, what is the end goal?
Okay, so the end goal is a society where...
First of all, how are you going about it?
Okay, so how are we going about it? Definitely, we have different programs. We're currently having a program that we do in secondary schools, where we're raising zero violence ambassadors, and we are trying to break the cycle of violence, because this is how it happens. When a child is exposed to violent behaviors, the boy child feels that it's okay to perpetrate violence against females, against his peers. The girl child feels, okay, like I was reading an article recently, and a young lady was saying that she was in a relationship and she has never been beaten. So there's a problem, because she grew up seeing her father always beat her mom, and then every male around her, you know, beats female. So she felt that it was right behavior. Now, what happens is this circle just continues. It continues. It continues. And if it's not stopped, it's a continuum.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're saying, okay, let's go to the secondary schools. Let's catch these children early.
All right.
Let's get them. So that's part of what we're doing. And another thing we're doing is we're advocating with stakeholders. We're working with stakeholders in the religious organizations, community development associations. We're working with ballets. We're going down to the community where it's happening to talk with them, to tell them these are behaviors that are not acceptable. And do you know the funny thing is that most times when you say these things, they are shocked because to them it's normal behavior. And so when you begin to tell them this thing is wrong and then you're showing them reasons why it's wrong, they begin to open up to tell you that they never saw it in that light. They felt it was okay. They felt it was all right. And so one of the things we ask them is, when you were growing up and you were looking into your mother's eyes, was she happy? And then most of them will tell you they never thought about it. It was never something that they thought about it. But looking back, they saw that she wasn't happy because she had to endure the beatings, she had to endure the slanders, she had to endure the insults, and they felt it was normal.
All right, so
she stayed.
Okay, so I appreciate the angle you're taking it to, especially when it comes to, you know, going through the secondary schools, you know, and of course delving a bit deeper into the community by involving traditional leaders and all of that. You would understand that when it comes to deprivation, especially on the girl child, there is a particular region of the country, without mentioning name, that it is very, you know, prevalent. And of course, you get to see children, especially the girl child, roam the street when their peers are in the school. You see them hawk around the street, hawk around the community when their peers are in school. What are you doing, especially in those interlands? Because some of these things that were just mentioned here, even if it is not the physical abuse, the deprivation of access to quality education is at the barest minimum, at the lowest of the low in some of these regions in the country. What are you doing, especially with penetrating these inlets?
Okay, so it's very interesting because right now that you're talking, I remember that yes, we actually carried out a study and we moved to one of these communities. And I want you to know that you see, theory is different from practice.
Sure.
And when we had discussions with some of these parents, what they told us was our parents hawked. We hawked. These children have to hawk. And we are also, you know, maybe hawking or staying it's not a store. They just, you know, put a table and then put wares and then they're also sitting down there. So what we told them is this: we understand that they are indigent families, but this is what we are advocating. Number one, let the children, whatever sales they want to do, let them do it after they come back from school. Because some of them even gave me examples of how growing up they hawked Ecor, they hawked different pap, you know, all these things in the morning before going to school, and then when they came back they hawked vegetables or plantains or whatever. So what we're saying is, we're not going to advocate for them hawking in the morning, right? Because most times they are, when the child hawks in the morning and the child goes to school, what happens is the child sleeps all day in school. So take advantage of the public schools, right, that are somewhat affordable, right? So send them to the public schools, let them go to school. When they come back from school, ensure that, number one, they do their homework, their assignments. If you don't know how to cross-check their assignments, get somebody that is knowledgeable around, who at least has, you know, a secondary school living certificate. Let them see what they're doing. And then, since you say hawking is very important, it's part of your culture, is what everybody does, we always advocate that the child, number one, should not hawk beyond the environment.
How can you checkmate that?
So it's very simple. When you were growing up, this is how we explain it. When you were growing up, you hawked within your environment. So this is what happens. If something happens to you, somebody 3 streets away, 4 streets away, knew whose child this was, right? So it was easier for them to checkmate it. Now we are in a bigger society. So if your child goes to hawk, let me use Lagos for example, because we're living in Lagos. So let's say you're living in Ogba and your child goes to hawk in Bega. Nobody knows your child in Bega. Anything can happen. And then the highway is another thing. So number one, let it be around your environment and let it never cross beyond that environment.
Okay.
In that way, your child is protected. And another thing is this: you find out that a lot of people will say the child must finish selling before she comes home. No, the child must not finish selling before she comes home. Since you want to teach her entrepreneurial skill and you want to give her what you also experience, and you want her to go out to work, because that is part of your form of livelihood, and it's not as if you're sleeping. By 6, let her come back home.
All right. For me, I differ a little bit about that, because yes, as much as it is something that we, our parents, experienced while they were growing up, their parents then had to inculcate this, entrepreneurial spirit and of course skills into them. Don't you also think that as a child, especially when you're below 5 years, you have no business learning any entrepreneurial skill of any sort? Because at that age, the child should be in school. Even if they have to be taught such, it should be after a certain period of time, maybe perhaps when you're done with your school. What do you think about that?
Okay, so yes, I agree that 0 to 6 or 1 month, 1 day to 6 years is the formative age of a child, right? And the child should not be allowed to hawk, and we strongly advocate for that. Yes. The child should at least be in his or her teenage age before they go out to hawk. But I want you to understand that when it comes to enforcement, we do not have a legal backing somewhat.
That's my next question.
To go into the communities to enforce this. Yes, we know what the Child Rights Act says. Yes, we understand. But understand that there are no economic cushions for these families, unlike developed countries. So what we can only do is we can go speak with the parents, and that's why I said we speak to gatekeepers, we speak to their community leaders, their baales, we just speak to them, tell them, educate the parents. They have these community meetings, and then we go there, we explain to them, we are advocating to say, please, this is why we're trying to protect your child. We're not just saying, apart from that, what about when the child is molested? A smaller child will find it more difficult to say no than an older child. An older child understands boundaries. They understand so many things. So what we can do is speak. Because the thing is this: if you say you want to begin, because that's why I always say theory is different from practice, right? When you're in the field, you find out that the field is different from when you were doing your analysis and getting your results and everything in your, you understand, it's different. So basically what we can only do is speak to them, is advocate, is to say, please, let's stop this. Because if you say you want to arrest, you arrest family A, arrest family B, arrest family C, and then you keep arresting round. Now by the time you're arresting round, don't forget that these parents are also the providers of these children. So what happens to these children? We don't have any structured place like a foster home where you can say you move the children to. Even the homes that we have that are state-based, if you go there, you find out that we have more children than space.
All right, so what are you doing finally as we coast home? What are you doing, especially with pushing for a legal framework that will back your actions? Because obviously, like you said, there's no legal framework on ground. So basically what you do is speak. So what are you doing in your own capacity to make sure that a law is passed that would help make your enforcement much easier? Okay,
so first of all, for enforcement to be easy, there has to be something like the legal backing for professionals like professional social workers. And that's why in other countries you find out that it's easier for them to, you know, for a social worker to say, okay, I want to carry out research here. Even though, yes, we don't have issues in carrying out research in Nigeria. You can just go into the field, get your research and get your data and come out. But in other countries, even getting research, you're backed, right? And so one of the things I was super excited about when I heard was that the Social Work Council was inaugurated last week. Okay. And so we believe that some way, somehow, that will provide a basic frame, a basic, you know, backup for social workers who want to go into the field to work. But on our own part, what we're doing is we understand that we have to lobby. And who are we lobbying? We're lobbying House of Assembly members, House of Rep members, local government chairmen. We are lobbying with these people because these people are closer to the grassroots. And we believe that with time, we will take our lobbying up to state governments and even to the federal as an NGO.
Thank you so much, Chizoba Kuni, for speaking with us on this issue today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And that was Chizoba Kuni, the Executive Director, Center for Individual and Child Development. This much we can share with you on the segment today. We will be transiting yet to another interesting segment, and that will be right after this time. And once again, my name is Joshua Okata.